River, it's natural to start with you. I mean, it's dangerous enough being a conflict journalist or a foreign correspondent. What you guys undertook with this project is a few steps beyond that. I mean, you went over by yourself. You didn't have the fixers and kind of mainstays of traditional journalism, including the institutional support. And on top of that, you upended your life to make this happen. What was the genesis of this for you, and what moved you to go to those lengths?
For me, it came down to the fact that ISIS was controlling the narrative out of Syria. That the news that I was seeing out of Syria was a snippet from here or from there, and the narrative was being controlled by ISIS's propaganda. And as a storyteller, I feel that I have an ability with my stories to create a great impact in this world, and I can choose to use that for good. I felt an overwhelming compulsion to apply what I know for all of us, because I know that we all have questions.
Explain some of the cultural background or lack of resources you guys struggled with as well.
Unfortunately, the leader of this unit, Boz, can't be here tonight, the guy that started this medical unit, and he looked at me and he said, "You were a medic once, you were in the Navy." And I said, "Well, I wasn't a medic, I was a fireman." He said, "Yeah, close enough." He said, "There's only 3 of us here, and we need you." But none of us actually went there to be medics. But all of us were drawn together over this singular need of, there's nobody, there's just nobody there. These kids get wrapped up in a blanket and thrown in a truck and driven for 2 or 3 hours over dirt fields to a hospital in agony, and they're dead by the time they get there. There's just such a different cultural perspective between a Shaheed culture where you raise a certain portion of your society to be martyrs for your society, and in a Kurdish country or homeland where there is no homeland, it's a great honor to die for your homeland. So you could die for God, or you could die for your people.
Laura, these are just some of the details that get lost in the media narrative, if there is one. Can you tell us a little bit more about that dynamic? Why is this complicated story not being told in nuanced ways? Why is it so simplistic?
Goodness
often?
gracious, that is a big question.
It's a small
but
thing,
there's
right?
so much that showed up in that film and in this conversation that is of great historical significance. What River was just saying about, I give my life for you, I mean, these guys are the frontline fighters against ISIS. There aren't many others, and the U.S. invested in them as the foot soldiers to beat back ISIS and take back those areas. So those Kurds fighting are fighting for us. Our government has set it up that way. This isn't all disconnected. The more you get into the guts of it, the more you see not only how connected things are, but how important they are to us, how relevant they are to us. They show up on the shores of a NATO ally. The Kurdish contingent of the Syrian war is really penned in and has very little to go with, and yet still was America's choice as the best bet against ISIS, and in the past weeks has proven to be the right one. They actually took back Raqqa, they took back... So that strategy worked. And in history, when we try to see what it looked like to get that done, there won't be a lot of pieces of documentary. There will be this one, and perhaps others, but this is a very important snapshot at a very important moment.
Ricky, thinking in that narrative way again, it strikes me that there's a lot of grisly scenes just by the nature of this work. This just strikes me as a few steps beyond that, though, of maybe it's the visceral way that it was filmed, or...
Well, he was immersed in it. Like, that point of view, River's point of view, there's no way that a journalist can get the story, in my opinion, unless you live it. We had editors crying. We had editors, story producers crying, watching this footage. It takes us 12 weeks of post-production or more. And he came home with 300 hours of footage. And I remember calling River up and saying, "River, we can make this into like a 6-hour series, or we can make this into the best documentary possible. What do you want?" And he goes, "The best documentary." So he lived it with these guys. He lived it. He was there doing it. And so that perspective, the only way you get it is to do it.
Well, especially because you're faced with this decision, especially as a local journalist, either you give up your craft, stop telling the stories, or you just do the work. And it seems like this, you shouldn't have to make that choice, but I imagine that has to be the decision on the ground.
There are hundreds of moral dilemmas in these situations, including, do you hire them to work? Is that endangering them? Or what they tell us is, look, either I'm here. Either I'm going to get a day's work or not. Or you're going to put me on retainer, or I'm just going to be here. These are their communities, and they're not leaving. And they also understand when we don't know what's going on there, everything is worse. When you don't have a snapshot of these areas, I mean, this is historic. As your 300, those hours of footage got to go straight to the Library of Congress. Like there will be versions of us 80 years from now trying to figure out what happened when you push back ISIS and try to connect the dots from the Iraq War to this. So this is River's life, but it's also modern Middle Eastern history. And without it, we will not be able to find the right answers.